Hello.
Good day, folks. I'm Gordon Clay Bailey. This is
I am Lisa Stifler Bailey.
I am a Unitarian Universalist minister, and I serve the Las Vegas, Nevada Unitarian Universalist congregation.
And I am, among other things, his spouse. I am an activist, a comedian, a performer, a writer, etc.
She's got many talents, and we're
True.
coming to you today to talk
About our marriage, really. I
about
mean,
marriage.
marriage,
Um,
multicultural marriage that we are clearly in. Yeah, I don't know if you can see the picture behind us. That's actually from our wedding 8 years ago, a little over 8 years ago.
and this isn't a bleach job. This is something called vitiligo, and I've been losing my melanin since 1994. Martin Luther King Day, in fact, 1994. There was an earthquake in Southern California, and I closed my hand in a car door, and as a result of that trauma, it started me down this path of losing my color. But think about
Whew.
the irony of being a black man turning white. And more specific to this conversation today is how race and color and ethnicity impacts our relationship, the love we
Yeah.
share for each other and everyone around us, the children and the extended family. So this is a an important conversation we feel, and that's why we're coming to you today.
Yeah, and I think that we've navigated it fairly well. I mean, we have had a lot of hiccups in our. We've been today is actually the anniversary, the 13th anniversary of our first date, and tequila may or may not have been involved.
Well, it wasn't the tequila. As good as I was feeling standing at a bar sipping a tasty blend,
Uh,
it had more to do with the enormous vitality of Lisa. And I think I was smitten from that first date, and yet trying to navigate um, how to blend peoples from very different places. I'm African American. My dad's from Point Coupé, Louisiana. Went to high school in New Orleans, and my mom's of Jamaican ancestry. Her parents arrived in Harlem in the early teens of 1917, I believe, and my mom is born in 1923 in Harlem. So I'm this kind of multicultural Black American, Jamaican that's got a family that runs the gamut from white like to ebony, and I love people across the human spectrum. In particular, as a minister, I'm called to be that open guy, but I was that based on my family of origin.
I grew up in Montana. My family of origin all looked just like me,
Not as good.
and pretty much. And I, I grew up in rural Montana, and I was raised by really good people, and my grandparents helped to do that. So rural Montana, rural Wyoming, couldn't be much different than New York City. Although I came to New York via San Francisco, so I had not been straight out of Montana by the time I came to New York, and I was in New York a total of about 30 years, and that's where obviously I meet Gordon, and I my education foray into, if you will, into the multicultural, diverse universe really started when I was as young as far as I was always very comfortable with everybody. Just didn't matter who you were. But in Montana, it was mostly people that look like me. And when I saw racism, it was towards the Native Americans who are in Montana and continue to be. And yet, I started to learn about this black white thing when I read Malcolm X my first year in New York City, and I realized how completely wrong I had been in my education. People had told me the wrong thing. it had been taught incorrectly. The kinds of things I believed about this man, I was just, I had it wrong. And it started to get me thinking, what else was I told incorrect, incorrect information about? So Malcolm X to this day continues to be one of my heroes. I highly recommend, if you've not read his autobiography, especially if you look like me, please do. And with that filter, thinking he evolves every chance, every information, every new piece of information he gets, he evolves with it and becomes a better human being each time. Like there's only one way he could have thought given information he had at that time. And I think about that in the way that I approach my anti-racism work, because each piece of new information um, asks me to evolve. Maya Angelou said, "We're all doing the best we can." I'm paraphrasing, but we're all doing the best we can. When you know better, do better.
Well, Lisa lives by that, and I can attest to that. Um, I'm someone that grew up in, as I say, I'm from Washington Heights or Harlem. I think I said that to you before. But this first 6 years of my life, I was in the Bronx, although my parents' law practice was in Harlem next to the Apollo Theater. So I had this experience of living in the Bronx in a mixed neighborhood, but the Bronx in the 1960s still felt like a very white space. And in fact, our next door neighbors were the Gilmores, and I think I was in love with the little girl that was about my age. So maybe it's not so strange that I would fall in love with Blondie here, but it seems strange to me as a black man whose father was a legal counsel for the UNIA and worked with the Garvey movement, and my mother, this Jamaican woman who's light skinned, but everything about her whole life is more or less spent within the Harlem community, doing things with black people, for black people, serving black people. Her law practice and my dad's law practice served the Harlem community. So it was never a question, do I have the capacity to love someone that doesn't look like me? And if you see the picture, I was brown skinned, and that was my existence for 40 years or so. But the reality of navigating the um the difficult moment to moment situations that a mixed couple could experience, and in particular a black and white couple, those were things that weren't easy. They remain not easy because people have all kinds of assumptions about who and what and where and why we should be. People assume I've always been this way. This is the only time I don't get pulled over by police anymore since my hands turned white, and yet I know that my vocal qualities, my hair texture, my nose, depending on where we are, it could play a role in how service is rendered. I remember Lisa and I being in Durham, North Carolina, and we ordered our food at the same time, but she got her food first, and I was waiting. That was in the white restaurant. And then we went to a black restaurant. My food came, and Lisa's food didn't come. So, I mean, just sitting down to having a meal can be
Yeah.
problematic within the context of life in the United States.
Yeah, and it's important, to listen to one another. I think that's one of the things that I've learned. In People ask me all the time, do you do all this anti-racism education? The workshops, the books, the book reads, and all of the stuff that I do, and talking to other white folks about being anti-racist. Do you do all that work because you're married to Gordon? And I say no. Gordon was married to me because I was already doing that work.
Bingo.
And that's true. I've been doing this work for over 30 years, like sort of heavily, right? I always lean towards. It's funny you talk about being in love with an Irish lass at 6, and one of my childhood friends reminded me that I wanted to marry Michael Jackson at 11. So I was in love with Michael Jackson at 11, which is very interesting as a young white girl from Montana. So that kind of speaks volumes about who I am.
Well, it doesn't just speak volumes about the capacity to love outside of your family of origin. It speaks to an innate ability to see beyond, right? Michael Jackson was a superstar, so
Superstar.
I'm sure there have been lots of children from across the spectrum
Who
that
loved
loved
Michael
Mike,
Jackson?
right? But but
Not
but
the only white girl that loved Michael Jackson.
and yet I believe I found in Lisa someone that had the capacity to see me not just this black man that was starting to morph into something different, but to see my innate qualities that make me the unique being that I am. Lisa could zero in on that, and what I found amazing about falling in love with her, and did we tell you this is the anniversary of our 13 years later from our first date, but that from the first date, I think I was in love with her. We spent so many hours on the phone after that, every night, every night, every night. I'm like,
Amazing.
this isn't really possible. How is this happening? And yet, my fear, my having been in a mixed marriage previously and knowing what hardships it could cause, because y- many might tell you I was an angry black man. Um, yeah, with righteous indignation at the way white people in particular had treated black folks. I was mad, and I was always ready to do battle with somebody that would step towards me with their white supremacist notions or ideals or behaviors. Like, oh hell no, that's not happening here. So falling in love with a white woman challenged me in that, would I allow the artificial construction of race, the false notion that human beings aren't just human, the evil ways they've tried to separate people historically, at least these last 500 years, and categorize people by a color scape, or how big is your forehead, or how wide is your nose, how thin or thick are your lips, how straight or wavy or kinky is your hair. These ridiculous notions that society at large has used, and in particular European and European American society has used. Would I allow that to stop my heart from growing and being able to have this wonderful love affair with Lisa? And so this dialogue that we're gonna do with you all is based on many years of people asking us to talk about this. I guess we have some unique or particular
Yeah.
insight into it. We've
Yeah.
got 4 children and a grandchild, various shades, hues of color, and navigating a
That's right.
multicultural, multi-ethnic family in New York, in Southern California,
Yeah.
now here in Las Vegas, has been rewarding, and it's been a challenge.
Yeah, and it's interesting. When we first met, we were going to the same Unitarian Universalist congregation. Gordon was not my minister, so there was nothing untoward about it. But he's right. The first date, it was, I just wanted, I was fascinated. We both wanted to, like, wow, who are you? Who are you? It was really interesting. And he's right. I didn't see him as a black man losing his color, although I knew he was a black man. But it's really understanding the essence of who each other is. And I think, and for a lot of Gordon, his essence is as a black man, right? He was raised in Harlem. That identity, that strong identity of his, and I have an identity of my own. I'm not, I've navigating that and figuring out what those are to one another and figuring that out. It hasn't always been easy. We had the first conversation we had about this. We don't shy away from these conversations, and in fact, I highly recommend you not shying away from them. Unfortunately, people who look like me aren't talking about race unless they're the racists. But the anti-racists are not doing that are not having those conversations. And if you're in a mixed couple, it's even more important. And I think some people want to avoid it, right? You want to, oh no, we can't possibly. It's like a place you can't go because it's too dark or it's too complicated and all of that is true. It is dark and it is complicated
Don't
and
use
yet
dark. See, that's one of those things. I don't like black
there
and
you go.
dark and words like that
That's
being
right.
used with some negative connotations. And that's
Yeah.
just part and parcel of American life.
Yeah.
Maybe it's part and parcel of the English language long before it came to these shores. But the reality is having an ability to love beyond what others told you. And if you're going to be in a mixed marriage or a mixed relationship, you've got to ground yourself in the facts of life. Human beings are human beings. Love and sexuality and desire and compatibility don't care about the color of your skin. It's about the chemistry you possess. It's about
Yeah,
the
somewhat. I mean, yeah.
individuality. Like you are who you are, and I
Yeah.
found you spectacular. And yet
I
and
mean,
yet and yet there were moments before we made the decision to go all the way that I had to take pause, that I had to say,
yeah.
like how about this? At that big event in Harlem when I don't know what was happening and they asked me to MC it,
Yeah.
but the idea of bringing my white wife to
I was
Harlem's.
I wasn't your wife yet.
You weren't my wife yet. Oh,
No.
so my lady friend, because
Your side piece.
ooh, I'm the audacity of it, but that it caused me concern. I've got my mother, my sister, and and my side piece. I mean, that any human being should have to be concerned about bringing their loved one to a special event and having to consider, well, where can we live as a mixed couple? Will our children be safe wherever we go?
Yeah.
Will somebody spit in somebody's food at a restaurant they don't think we should be in? Did Lisa only become an anti-racist because she's involved with me, or have I become more of a more accepting of European culture because I'm with her? Like there are all these kind of ideas that people have. They make assumptions about who we are, about why we're together, about what we're trying to do. Like we're just doing it to be like we're gonna show the world that these kinds of relationships could work. It's that plus the most important thing that we love each other and we want this to work and we want relationships across the spectrum of relationships to work. As long as you're of age, you should be free to love who you want to love. And we're hoping that this offering we're giving to to the world via technology will be of use to somebody, and that's our hope. So that's where I'm coming from. It's, our religious life together is important in that the first principle of the Unitarian Universalist faith is the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. I'd love that to go to extend to all living things. That's the next evolution. But right now, that we came together in a religious institution that has as its prime directive the dignity of each other and everybody, and that made a huge difference. I
Well,
think.
and it was to promote and affirm, right? It's not just the inherent worth and dignity. It's promoting and affirming the inherent worth and dignity. I just want to travel back just a tiny bit. First of all, yes, Gordon's correct. This is not a political statement. Marriage, ever, never
Mhm.
was. In fact, a lot of yeah, it was. We get a lot of strange comments, and I've actually lost a couple of friends, and I don't know why I've lost my friends. Maybe it's because of my relationship with Gordon. I mean, we'll never know, right? That's part of being in a relationship like this is you just don't know. And that's okay with me. I mean, if they walk, that's better. But I was going to lose them anyway because it's not a compatible friendship any longer, right? If their values aren't the same as mine. And the other thing is when Gordon calls me out on something, right? And I call him out on stuff all the time about gender issues, and he calls me out on stuff all the time about racism and using a word I used. And sometimes I push back. Mostly I don't. Mostly about 95% of the time I do not push back. I take it and I might go, oh, I might sigh, shit, I made another mistake, or yo, oops, I did that, or I don't know, I didn't know I was doing that, but oh, thanks for telling me, right? But it's really you have to hear it and listen. I think listening to your partner, first of all, it's just great marriage advice, and we haven't always done that, quite frankly. We've had some ups and downs because we weren't paying attention to one another properly, right? We weren't noticing what the other one was up to or how they felt about something, or so I think and we're both pretty opinionated and strong personalities, so um we have to remember that it's always coming from a good place, always. Nothing I ever say or do to Gordon is ever to harm him or hurt him intentionally. Sometimes that happens, right? You unintentionally hurt somebody by something you've said, something you've done, but that's a really important one. So trust, communication, and passionate relationships are not always easy relationships, and this is definitely a passionate relationship in lots of different ways. We challenge each other, we excite each other, we try and lift each other up, and I think that that's really important, and that's what we want to do more of. And through this medium, we're hoping that people have questions for us, how we're navigating things. We're going to have a whole bunch of topics, but we definitely want to hear from you. So we're at the Bailey View. Please subscribe, because if you subscribe to us, then we get, anyway, that's not, I don't know, but subscribing is important, because then we actually have more people to follow us. And the other thing is, if you want to email us directly, you can email us at thebaileyview at gmail.com. And Bailey is Bailey. So thebaileyview at gmail.com. So we'll take your questions, your suggestions, anything that you're worried about. We're hoping we don't get, a lot of hate mail. Although we're pretty sure that's going to happen too. But the reason we're doing this is to bridge any of those gaps, to destigmatize these conversations, to understand why they're important and why they're important to us, right? And we have, both of us, between us, we have over 100 years of experience. We both have very specific perspectives, and I think that they're valuable. I think that they'll be valuable to some folks in situations that maybe you didn't expect to find yourself in. Maybe your brother or sister is dating somebody that you don't understand, right? Maybe, I mean, there's lots of different ways to utilize these conversations, and we're really hoping to be of service and to be of use to those that are hearing us.
That's a wonderful word. I was hearing Martin Luther King speaking in my head when you said service, because the drum major instinct, and it's not as if Lisa and I are the first mixed couple to come before people who wants to offer some of their, I'd say, wisdom, but it may just be the mistakes we made that someone may learn from.
That's right.
But
please learn from us.
What we do know is that if you are in love with someone and they happen to be from another ethnicity or cultural community or religious group, or the fake premise of race, right? A human being that's racially different than you according to the lies they've told us about race, right? One human race. We are offering ourselves and our experience as hopefully maybe a Band-Aid, or there is a balm in Gilead. Well, here's a balm from Las Vegas. We're two people that love each other deeply, love our families, our children. We adore them. We've got 4 beautiful children. Yeah. And a granddaughter that's the
They're not children anymore.
apple of Papa's eyes. But we're here to offer up this experience of sharing love for 13 years with the world in the hopes that it'll make somebody's life maybe a little easier, a little better, a little less bumpy.
Yeah. All right. Thanks all.
See you soon, we hope.
Ciao.